Welcome into the Solo Shot Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Dom Manna. Happy Solo Shot Saturday. Happy 250th birthday, America. Hope you all are having a wonderful 4th of July. Stay safe out there. It's supposed to be real hot. Great for barbecues. Hit the pool, enjoy the time, and be thankful for all the things that make this country what they are, at least in the positive ways. And it's been a while, but wanted to hop on here and talk about baseball. And with baseball and America being so intertwined through the course of history, it just felt right to do a 4th of July episode here. The Midsummer Classic, which is a personal favorite of mine. I still stand by this, that baseball does the all-star game and festivities the best of the 4 major sports. The fan vote is the only problem I really have with it, and it's for years like this. Obviously, there's going to be a half dozen plus guys who are named all-stars, whether they're voted in by the fans to start or get put in by the coaches as reserves, that don't end up pitching in the game or playing in the game due to injury. And that's all well and good. There will be some interesting reserve choices and replacements. I know there was a lot of talk about Jacob Mizorowski last year getting the nod over Christopher Sanchez and over some other guys. And Jacob Mizorowski is looking like a guy who might start the All-Star game this year. That's funny how much can change in a year. But the fan vote, one player from each league, the top vote getter through the first round of voting, automatically starts the All-Star game. So to no shock at all, in the National League, Shohei Ohtani won the fan vote. And while you can argue that Kyle Schwarber is a more deserving DH to start, especially with the festivities being held at Citizens Bank Park, Shohei Ohtani is the biggest attraction this game has, and it is no shock that the Dodgers fans and the Japanese fans and baseball fans everywhere wanted to see Shohei Ohtani out there. But when it comes to the American League side, the Blue Jays fans really stuffed the ballot box, so much so that they have plenty of guys that are in this final vote for the starters that are flat out just not all-stars. But Ernie Clement, who is probably their most clear all-star position player this year, ended up getting the most votes of everybody in the American League. Not Aaron Judge, not Mike Trout, not Nick Kurtz or Bobby Witt Jr., but Ernie Clement, who's had a phenomenal season and I would say is the best second baseman in the American League. So I have no problem with him starting in the All-Star game, but I found it really strange that he ended up getting the most votes by anybody in the American League. And as we look at these pairings for who's going to start in the All-Star game, I think it just really shows that the fan vote is kind of a fallacy. And it's tough that they allow us to do so because the All-Stars really mean something in the grand scheme of things. Year to year, it might not mean as much, but the people that are able to accumulate multiple all-star appearances, it really is an important thing. And it's our responsibility as the fans, I think, to get out there and actually vote. And you look at the guys who are finalists here, and it is just insane that Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who obviously is a big name, is a finalist against Ben Rice, who's been completely cold since Aaron Judge went on the IL. Ben Rice is the deserving one of the two, but you could argue Nick Kurtz is the obvious guy who should be starting the All-Star game at first base. Wilson Contreras, much more deserving than Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to be a finalist to start. Those are the kind of guys that aren't even being considered, and one of them might end up getting snubbed because of it. Because if Vladimir Guerrero Jr. wins the fan vote, then Ben Rice is likely to be a reserve, or Nick Kurtz or Wilson Contreras. They're not going to hold 4 first basemen. So that can really affect these guys' careers when they're trying to add these accolades to it. Second base already finalized. Shortstop, Bobby Witt Jr. is matched up against Andres Jimenez of the Blue Jays. Jimenez is not even close to the next most deserving shortstop in the American League. Bobby Witt Jr. should win in a landslide, but if he doesn't for whatever reason, he will clearly be a reserve, and that will hurt other guys in the American League from making it the shortstop spot. Third base, Okamoto is there, matched up against Junior Caminero. Junior Caminero is already committed to the home run derby, so I have a feeling he's going to be the starter, and he deserves to be, especially over Okamoto, who's had a good year, but not quite all-star worthy. And then you look at the DH spot, Yordan Alvarez, by far the best one, but there's clearly some other guys who deserved some consideration, more than George Springer, who ended up being a finalist with a 647 OPS. And then in the outfield, Jesus Sanchez and Dalton Varsho, who are both having nice years, nothing special, but solid years as starting outfielders for the Jays, are finalists to start. And one of them might actually end up getting in there, with the fact that Aaron Judge and Mike Trout are unlikely to participate with the injury. So I think some people are not voting them in. So that affects the backlog of worthy AL outfielders who deserve to be there. And this isn't just the Blue Jays I'm calling out. On the National League side, this happened too. The National League voting was dominated by 3 markets. The Braves, who have done this before, the Philadelphia Phillies, who are obviously hosting this year's festivities, and the Los Angeles Dodgers, who have a huge fan base and international fanfare and everything that goes along with it, with the Shohei Ohtani experience and the back-to-back World Series championships. Matt Olson versus Freddie Freeman, 2 guys that are actually both deserving. I think Olson should be starting over Freeman, but you could argue Bryce Harper, who is the hometown first baseman, is more deserving than both of them. All 3 of them deserving all-stars, but Olson is likely to get there. Second base was Ozzie Albies versus Bryson Stott, who the Phillies are not even giving regular plate appearances to anymore. Ozzie Albies is a good player. I know me and my buddy Jake, who's going to listen to this eventually, joke around about Ozzie Albies, but you could genuinely argue that there are 3 second basemen in the National League that are more deserving all-stars than the 2 that are finalists, that being Bryce Terang, who I think is the best second baseman in all of baseball, JJ Weatherholt, who's having the best rookie second base season maybe of all time, and then of course Brandon Lau, who, if you're just looking for an offensive second baseman, which Ozzie is as well, just much better numbers, having a much bigger impact on his team individually. But that's before you even get into Xavier Edwards or Luis Ariz, who are playing better defense with contact skills that are ahead of both of these guys, and how one of those guys making it as the starter is going to affect the ability for some of those guys I just named to have a chance to get in there, even as an injury replacement. The shortstop side of things, Mookie Betts, who is a big star, a big name, which it makes me have a little bit less problem with it, but he doesn't deserve to be an all-star finalist over Otto Lopez, who's having a phenomenal year, leading the league in batting average and hits, and is the most valuable player on the Marlins team that had the hottest month of June of any offense in baseball, and probably deserves to start. But CJ Abrams is matched up against Mookie Betts, and if CJ Abrams, who deserves to be an all-star in his own right this year, ends up losing the name battle to Mookie Betts, then Otto Lopez could get snubbed. And you look at third base, it's Max Muncy versus Alec Boehm, who is a below league average hitter. Max Muncy, I know third base in the National League isn't great. I was voting for Nolan Arenado during the process. But again, if the domino effect that these decisions have, I think, is really important. And it's very clear in the National League on the outfield side of things, where both Ronald Acuna, who's been hurt, and Michael Harris, who's having a nice year, but not quite as great of a year in the National League as Pete Crow Armstrong, who leads the entire National League in WAR, or Corbin Carroll, who's having another phenomenal season to his young start of his career, or James Wood of the Washington Nationals, who has turned into an absolutely superstar hitter. Those guys are not finalists. Instead, Ronald Acuna Jr., Michael Harris, Teoscar Hernandez, these are guys that made the list as finalists. Juan Soto doesn't look like he's going to be snubbed this year. He was one of the biggest snubs of last year's All-Star game. He made it as a finalist and is having a phenomenal season, deserves to be an All-Star. But how many of those other guys are going to get snubbed because Brandon Marsh or Teoscar Hernandez or any of these other guys that are finalists get a spot ahead of them? It's going to be really interesting to see what the final results are, and I'm sure we'll get that either over the weekend or early next week. And then the game of the reserves and the injury replacements will begin, and we'll see who truly gets snubbed, but there will be multiple egregious snubs due to how the fan voting took place this year. And I just think that's a shame, because as baseball fans, at least we should be voting for big names we want to see at the All-Star game, as opposed to just voting for all the players on your favorite baseball team to make it, regardless of the season they're having. I just don't think that's good for the game. I don't think it's good for growing the game. We saw with the Royals way back. The Braves did it a few years ago. When you have a bunch of all-stars in the starting lineup, yeah, it's cool for you, but for the rest of baseball, it's like, is that really the best the National League has to offer? Are those really the stars I want to be watching today? To me, the All-Star game still means a whole lot, even though to most people it's a box checked, it's a vacation, it's an honor, but it's not a major award for most. I think it's a huge deal for these guys' legacies, whether they only get there once or they're someone that's trying to get there multiple times and be labeled a perennial all-star type guy throughout their career. We have reached the halfway point in the Major League Baseball season. We surpassed it, actually. And I just wanted to kind of touch base on where teams are. I think this baseball season for me in particular has been fairly depressing, and it's because my Boston Red Sox, despite having a 4-game sweep of the New York Yankees in the last week, being 14 games back of the Rays, and having just one of the worst offensive seasons the Red Sox have ever mustered together. I think it was very clear to me at the beginning of the offseason that this team needed offense on top of Bregman Anthony in the middle of the lineup. And the fact that you lost Bregman and Wilson Contreras has been fantastic. He's been everything you thought. But when you don't add anyone else and you see guys take steps back or be hurt, it just is really, really difficult to put together a great season, no matter how great their pitching staff has been this year. I think the Red Sox all-stars this year are all going to be on the pitching staff side of things, even though Wilson Contreras, Wilyer Abreu, and Ceddanne Rafaela have all put together offensive numbers. I think with the way the fan voting fell, that they're very unlikely to make it as alternates. The Rays right now, with Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton on the IL, they sit 3.5 games up on the Yankees. And I said coming into this year that I expected all 5 teams in this division to finish over 500. It's not looking like that's going to be the case right now because of my Red Sox, unfortunately. But the Rays have had a phenomenal bounce back year. I really like some of the pieces they have. Caminero has been scorching hot in the month of June. They've gotten great contributions across the lineup. The bullpen has been improved. The starting rotation has been better than it looks on paper. And they're just a fun team that's back in the race again, which does not shock me because when I pick them to make the playoffs, they don't. And when I pick them to miss the playoffs, they make it. But followed not far behind by the Yankees, who without Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton have been kind of a mediocre offense, but their pitching staff with Cam Schlittler and Garrett Cole, Max Fried, hopefully coming back soon. By the time October rolls around, they should be the favorites in the American League, barring any crazy deadlines by any of these teams. They're very good. And they're going to make the playoffs. The Toronto Blue Jays are 11 games back, having a little bit of a World Series hangover despite not winning it. Talked about guys who just aren't clearly all-stars. Their pitching staff has been hit or miss. Their bullpen, Louis Varland's really stepped up when Jeff Hoffman lost the closing job. But this team is not the team that challenged the Dodgers last October. In the American League Central, the Chicago White Sox sit one game ahead of the Cleveland Guardians. I still think the Guardians end up winning this division, but hats off at this point in the season for the White Sox to be in first place and to be really pushing for it. I would love to see them buy a little bit at the deadline and get a couple arms in that rotation and bullpen to really push for October baseball. Those fans deserve it. Murakami, who was my pick for Rookie of the Year and was looking really good, is still on the IL, and their offense is still slugging with guys like Colson Montgomery and Miguel Vargas leading the way. Bray Montgomery has come up. They've gotten contributions from guys young and old, and they're just a fun team to watch, man. And I just feel so good for those baseball fans that at this point in the season, their team is still relevant. Cleveland is not followed that far behind by the Minnesota Twins, who have actually had a nice bounce back year and are convinced that they shouldn't be selling pieces like Byron Buxton and Joe Ryan. They're 4.5 games back from first place, and they're ahead of teams like the Tigers and the Royals that most people had finishing way ahead of them at this point in the season. So hats off to the Twins for staying somewhat relevant in a division. And the AL West, Texas Rangers have been on a little bit of a upward trajectory. 7 of their last 10 they've won, and they've done this with Corey Seager having multiple IL stints. Brandon Nimmo and Jake Berger and Josh Young. These are the guys, Jock Peterson. These are the guys leading the offense. Wyatt Langford's had multiple stints on the IL. Corey Seager's had multiple stints on the IL. Ezekiel Duran has been fantastic filling in. And their pitching, which was one of the best in the American League last year, has came back. And even though they're not quite as good, have been really solid. They've been giving them a chance to win games, and that's all you can really ask for in a ballpark that is pitcher friendly. And the offense has answered. Right now, they're tied with the Mariners for first place going into the weekend. And you know what can happen the rest of the way. The Mariners still, I think, should be favored to win this division. They have the best pitching staff. Their offense has been very up and down, but I think is deeper than the rest of the teams in this division. And the Astros are only 2 games back. I picked them to be a playoff team this year. A lot of people were like, oh, they're going to sell. Jordan will be available. Paredes, all these guys. I don't think they're selling. I think they're right in where they want to be. And if anything, they might even look to add an outfielder to help their lineup or a starter to help their rotation to really push for October here. They have a fun team, and I like what they're doing so far here. The Athletics are 3 games back. Their pitching staff outside of Gage Jump has been pretty atrocious, but their offense led by Nick Kurtz has been fun to watch. Shea Langoliers is going to start the game in the AL for catcher. Has had a fantastic season as well. And that ballpark has not done them any favors with having a below average pitching staff because it is a bandbox and people are hitting home runs and having double-digit run days often out there in Sacramento. And the Angels are in last place, 8 games back, and they said that they're not looking to sell Reed Detmers. They're not looking to sell Joe Adell. They're not looking to sell anybody. They believe. I don't know why. They've fired their GM before the draft. They have brought in John Mozeliak, which as a Cardinals fan, National League fan, that name is definitely polarizing at this point to run the show. And I'm interested to see if they don't sell, it'll be almost as dumb as not selling Shohei Ohtani for Junior Caminero and Carson Williams. But we will see if they end up moving anybody at the deadline or not. On the National League side of things, the Braves have been fantastic, and they looked like they were running away with the division. The Phillies have got within 3 games of them, and I think both teams are in a very similar spot. going into the All-Star break. Both teams have some real solid bats in their lineup and really solid arms at the top of the rotation, but could use another piece. I think the Phillies could use one more bat. I think the Braves could use one more arm, and both of them I think are going to be in this. The Marlins, who I talked about, have been fantastic this year. They're only 6 games back in the division, and they've been really fun to watch. And with a starting rotation that features Sandy Alcantara, Yuri Perez, and a breakout Max Meyer, with some great pitching prospects on the way, the future is bright in Miami. And with Owen Casey breaking out, with Kyle Stowers coming back to go with those middle infielders, Otto Lopez and Xavier Edwards, who have been fantastic this year, there's a lot to like for the Marlins, a team that perennially would be sellers, I think might even look to buy in a couple places this time around. The Washington Nationals and the New York Mets, I don't think either team's really in it. I know the Nationals are a lot closer in terms of record, but their pitching staff is also god-awful, and outside of C.J. Abrams and James Wood, the lineup has a few guys that have been impressive. Nasim Nunez, Curtis Mead, they've had nice years, but I think that the Nationals are still a year or two away from really pushing for it. And the Mets have been a disaster, almost as bad as the Red Sox. I think the Red Sox are arguably worse because theirs is a combination of poor planning and performance, as opposed to, because you're in an offensive ballpark in Fenway and you build that team and you're shocked with the results, versus the Mets have gotten very unlucky with injuries so far this year, on top of performance and some guys not working out. But the Mets, they have a couple easy pieces to sell. They might even look to buy a couple guys that are controllable for the future. And they have Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor and Nolan McLean locked into their core. So I do not feel too sorry for Mets fans, even though it's been a really rough season. The NL Central, the Brewers are the class still. I tried to tell y'all. I did not know Jacob Mizorowski was going to take this next level up. I did have Kyle Harrison as the X factor. I did think he was going to have a breakout season, and he's going to be an all-star. He's been fantastic. Great pickup for me in fantasy this year. Milwaukee's been really great. They're kind of the team everyone's circling. Will they do a CC Sabathia run with Tarek Skubal? I'd love to see that. But regardless, a team that is really to fear in the National League. The Cubs, despite their entire pitching staff dying, are only 5 games back of the Brewers. And I think they have a real shot if they can add a pitcher or two at the deadline to push the Brewers for this division. The St. Louis Cardinals got off to a really hot start. They've faded recently, but I have seen a lot of things to really hold on to personally this year, and I think the future is very bright. Jordan Walker turning around is a huge deal. JJ Weatherholt being as advertised is awesome, maybe even a little bit better than advertised. And the pitching staff taking some strides too, with some guys that had some pretty high prospect pedigree in their organization that are finally starting to give them some quality innings. They're still, I think, a year or two away, but with the core to do so. The Pirates, Paul Skeens had a rough night a couple nights ago, but they're improved. And I talked about the improvements to that lineup. Brandon Lau should be an all-star. Ryan O'Hearn's been fantastic. They've gotten some other contributions. They should be proud of what they're doing, and I won't be shocked if they actually add a bat at the deadline to try to push a little bit further and stay in the wild card hunt by using some of their excess of pitching or anything like that. They've been linked as a Skubal team, but I highly doubt that they'll be the ones that pull that trigger. And the Reds have been kind of a mess. Chase Burns has been fantastic, so is Sal Stewart, my rookie of the year pick. But the rest of the team has been very hit or miss. Hunter Green's still not back. We'll see what the Reds end up turning into in 2027 beyond, but this year seems to be kind of a flush. And NL West, obviously the Dodgers are the class. They're 12 games up on the Padres and Diamondbacks, who are those other teams that are in it. for wild card purposes. The Giants have been one of the biggest laughingstocks in baseball this year, arguably worse than the Red Sox and the Mets. Those three teams are probably the ones that are going to be the three finalists for most disappointing team of 2026. But the Giants, I think, was a little bit more writing on the wall that this team could be bad, as opposed to the Mets and Red Sox, who a lot of people had playoff and maybe even World Series aspirations for. But the Giants have been miserable. The Rockies been just a little bit more miserable. They're 21 and a half games back. The Giants are 2 games up on the Rockies right now. So that is where we stand halfway through the league. I think that this deadline is going to be extremely crucial. I think when you look at the National League, it's clear that the Braves, Phillies, Dodgers, and Brewers are legit World Series contenders. The Marlins, Cubs, Padres, and Diamondbacks are all teams that if they add a piece or two could be sneaky dark horses. But that is all yet to be seen. On the American League side, it's really the Yankees league to lose at this point. Obviously, the Rays have been a little bit better than this season. The Blue Jays, if they make it to the playoffs, have the talent to beat them. The White Sox and Guardians have been fun. The Rangers and Mariners can definitely pitch with them, but if the Yankees lineup is healthy, I don't think they can keep up with that offense. So that's a little bit more depressing when you look across the American League. And with and that's also what's really gotten me down this baseball season and kind of gotten me out of my normal flow is the American League is maybe not historically bad, but in recent memory, one of the worst states I've seen it. And the fact that the Red Sox are at the bottom of that, that's what makes me really sad. But speaking of the deadline, my prediction are pretty cut and dry. I think there's going to be a lot less movement than's currently being predicted. I think a lot of teams just, like I said, the American League being so bad across the board, and the National League being where it is, I don't see as many clear sellers with pieces that people will want to buy. There's some obvious things, like I said, like Reed Detmers should be moved, but if the Angels don't want to move him, the Joe Ryan should be moved, but if the Twins don't want to move him, I do think that the more impactful pieces moved at the deadline will be arms. Tarek Skubal obviously being the biggest one. And I know a lot of people want to see him have a CC run with the Brewers. I know a lot of people were tying him to the Mets before the season started as a possible trade candidate. But when you really look at it, the team that has the prospect capital to get it done and the team that is very likely to do so is the Dodgers. I know nobody wants to hear that. I know it's chalk. I know it would make a lot of casual baseball fans mad. But they have put themselves in the position to take on that kind of contract, to give up the kind of prospects needed to get them. And you add Skubal to a playoff rotation with Yamamoto and Ohtani and one of Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, Emmett Sheehan as the Eric Lauer as the fourth starter, Roki Sasaki, if he can find his way. It's dirty. But I do think with the possible lockout coming from the CBA, with the potential for a salary cap, the Dodgers have the opportunity to be an official dynasty, a three-peat. To me, 3 championships in a 5-year span is a dynasty, but to like really be considered a dynasty with this group, the Ohtani group, a three-peat would cement that. And with everything that's looming over them, I don't see why you wouldn't overextend yourself and give the best offer to the Tigers to just go for it. They've shown that they don't have fear in making these big moves, and they're willing to pay with unproven talent for proven talent. And if you throw Yamamoto, Skubal, Ohtani, Snell in a 7-game series, it's going to be pretty hard to beat, as good as some of these rotations are across baseball. The next most impactful arm that I think is going to be moved is Sonny Gray. I think he is the most obvious trade candidate to go to the Chicago Cubs. I don't know if this is going to be a buy low on Kevin Alcantara. I don't know if it's going to be a buy low on Matt Shaw. I don't know if they're going to go deeper into the prospect pool with the Cubs and pull someone from AA that they like. But the Red Sox should be able to get a nice piece or two from a pitching needing team that doesn't want to pay the Skubal price or can't pay the Skubal price. And I think the Cubs just are that team. I wouldn't be shocked if the Brewers got involved as well on Sonny Gray. I think that's a much more feasible trade candidate for them than Skubal, but I expect them to be in on Skubal first. Freddie Peralta would be hilarious if the Brewers traded for him back and he just started pitching great again. Freddie Peralta is the other big arm that I expect to be moved at this year's deadline. He's very cheap, and I expect the Mets to move him to the AL because they probably don't want to see him. And the team that I'm really hoping trades for Freddie Peralta is the Chicago White Sox. Like I said, I think if they add a pitcher to their rotation and a pitcher to their bullpen and really go for it in the AL Central, they can make some noise. And Freddie Peralta, he's only getting $8 million this year, so it would basically be like $4 million they'd have to commit to him for the rest of the season. I love that, and the White Sox have so many great prospects and young players to deal from that the Mets can recoup some of what they gave up to get him while giving him up for a half-year rental. And I think that him in that ballpark with that team, that change of scenery, going from a team that is miserable and not in it to a team that is fun, young, exciting, will be great for him. So those are the three arms that I really expect to be moved. There's obviously going to be some lower-end bats and lower-end arms and relievers. Aroldis Chapman needs to get dealt. I don't know if the Red Sox are going to pull that trigger, and if so, who's going to pay the biggest price? Obviously, the Padres have been tied to him, but I'm really hoping, as he has tied the record for most relief pitcher strikeouts and sits only 18 saves away from 400 for his career, that wherever he goes, it's a opportunity for him to be the closer, to close games. Something that ruined a personal favorite of mine, Craig Kimbrell's career way back when, was when he was having a dominant season for the Cubs. He was the top reliever available, and the White Sox traded for him. They already had Liam Hendricks, and they decided to use Kimbrell in mainly like a setup role or a high leverage late role. He pitched in the 7th or 8th inning. And his ERA bloomed. He didn't get, he was on pace for 40 something saves that year. He finished with 22. And it really derailed a Hall of Fame career in his right now, hoping the same doesn't happen to Chapman this time around. So wherever he ends up going, I just hope that it's a spot where he can be the closer. San Diego's not that. Philadelphia's not that. So I'm hoping whether he goes to be the Dodgers closer down the stretch with Diaz down, or he ends up pitching meaningful innings for the White Sox, that would be awesome to see as well. Like I said, get a reliever back there, the bullpen. But the team that I keep seeing when I think of Chapman getting signed, and maybe it's just because of the like romanticizing in my head, but it's going back to the Cubs. And I would not be shocked because it says Sonny Gray to the Cubs makes so much sense if they try to make a package deal for both of them. And that would unload some salary for the Red Sox and possibly get a bigger prospect pool than just Sonny Gray or Chapman would alone. So that's my kind of my sleeper team for Chapman, is to go back to the Cubs. I know Palencia is great, but I think he would be the closer over Palencia, at least down the stretch. And yeah, I mean, there's so many relief pitchers and so many bats and so many back end starting pitchers that I think will switch teams. But I don't expect it to be quite as fireworky and exciting. Everyone's waiting for the Scooble ball to drop. Like I said, Sonny Gray and Freddie Peralta are the next two guys that some teams might go right for and not wait for Scooble, or some teams might be waiting as a fallback. But let me know in the comments below who you believe will be moved this deadline and where. I'd love to play these exercises and see what I get right versus what I get wrong. A lot of the times I end up being dead wrong, and there's some mystery team or some fit that I just completely missed. But I feel really good about those predictions. Peralta to the White Sox, Gray to the Cubs, Scooble to the Dodgers. And we will see what happens in just a few weeks. Once the draft is over and the All-Star break's done, teams will be calling each other and making moves. Here at the Solo Shot Sports Podcast, we can throw back down the third base line to this day in baseball history. And the 4th of July has many baseball moments throughout history. Like I said, baseball is as American as hot dogs and apple pie. It's very intertwined with the history of this country. And there are so many things that have happened, so many great games that have been played, great performances, historic milestones. Phil Niekro and Nolan Ryan both etched their 3,000 strikeouts on this date in the past. There was the debut of the first two Cuban-born players on this date in 1911. The first stolen base cycle. John McGraw, who went on to have a Hall of Fame management career, stole second, third, and home in one inning in the year 1900 as a player. And there, you can go on and on. I want to shout out thisdayinbaseball.com, which is the resource I've always used to just look up the day and see what happened before I dive into some deeper research through Saber or different avenues, Baseball Reference, to learn more about the players and the events that took place, to share with all of you here. And the one that really just called out to me and I think is so impactful was on this date in 1934. The Negro National League, Pittsburgh Crawfors played against the Homestead Grays, and Satchel Paige threw a no-hitter in a 4-0 win, one walk, one error away from a perfect game. And why this was so special, because Satchel Paige threw many no-hitters, both in the Negro National League as well as barnstorming, is because Josh Gibson was his catcher that day. And this was the only time in Negro League history which battery mates in a no-hitter were both members of the National Baseball Hall of Fame. And that's something that had never happened in the white majors either. The craziest part about this story is that the legend claims that Paige then drove to Chicago to shut out the Chicago Americans 1-0 in 12 innings, giving him 2 shutouts in 2 different cities in the same day. While that claim has been disproved, it's like the Wade Boggs beer story, it was documented and is something that some people still believe out there. Satchel Paige is one of the most impactful players in baseball history, not just pitchers, not just black aces, players. And it's because he was the one that really broke the black baseball scene onto the national level for a lot of people. He was an attraction within himself, and I know there was guys like John Donaldson and stuff that were part of these barnstorming events and everything like that. But Satchel Paige pitched all over the country, over so many years, so many innings pitched, so many great performances. He was an 8-time All-Star, and it's no coincidence that when Ted Williams was inducted to the National Baseball Hall of Fame, that he went out and vouched that this Hall of Fame doesn't have the same meaning until all-time greats like Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson are with him enshrined. And it didn't take very long for the Hall of Fame to follow suit and to elect both of those gentlemen who were part of this no-hitter on this day in 1934. A truly historic feat. And as more catchers get elected to the Hall of Fame, the chances of there being a no-hitter or perfect game combo inducted go up. But to this date, that still appears to be the case in terms of a Hall of Fame catcher and pitcher being battery mates for such a rare baseball occasion. And I hope we see one here on the 4th of July, 2026. If you paid attention to the thumbnail or went ahead and read the description before finishing this video, you probably put together that this is going to be the last episode published of the Solo Shot Sports podcast. 144 episodes is serious work, and that's just here on YouTube. Before I was recording here at the ETV Community Media Center, I was doing audio only podcasts where I was covering both Major League Baseball and the NFL. And I did about 20 something episodes of that before I was discovered by Jay, the board chair here. And he told me to come down and start recording the podcast here. And I put all of this together. But 3.5 Major League Baseball seasons. You see below me, over 9,400 solo shots tracked by me every day. I would go into the Major League scorecards and I would tally up these solo shots. There was a time where I was trying to post them all on Twitter as they happened every day, and that got to be pretty overwhelming. There was a time where I was doing TikToks about the swaggiest solo shot of the day, and I had a lot of fun doing this. To me, it was a portfolio piece and an exercise to keep the gear spinning on my radio chops. I had been doing college radio for 3 years prior to graduating, and it was something I really missed and something I wanted to get back to. And I'm so glad that I did so. I met so many amazing people through this process, both here at ETV as well as through this podcast. And I'm so thankful to each and every one of you who took a minute or to a half hour to sometimes an hour plus of your week to listen to me giving my takes on baseball, the good, the bad, the ugly, recounting some great moments in the game's history, and just going along for the ride. Something that I've told all the prospective podcasters is 80% of podcasts don't have an episode 20. For whatever reason, life getting in the way, creative problems, financial issues. There's a million factors as to why someone doesn't continue with the project. But to make it here 7 times that with a little juice on the end is something that I'm definitely proud of. You have to know when to hold them. You have to know when you fold them. You have to know when to walk away and when to run. And it's time to walk away. I love the game of baseball. Like I said, this season has been a little bit extra miserable between some personal things in my life as well as the Red Sox performance. But truly, in the past, I had always been consistent with it. I had done it, pretty much every single week. There was a couple times where things got in the way and I'd miss a week, but I'd get right back on the horse. And I had two prolonged breaks, the two longest the show's ever had. And the drive for me to get back to it, and to continue it and to do the prep needed to put together a decent program for y'all, it really, really faded. And like I said, this has been a portfolio project. It's been something that is fun for me, something that's an outlet for me for some time. And I am grateful for the opportunities it's given me. But I think that it's time to end this venture. And hopefully down the road, you will see me again, whether it be through radio or through another podcast program. Doing this as a solo shot has not been easy. I make all the thumbnails. I do all the editing. I make all the intros. I do all the graphics that you've seen, starting from the green background that I had, to the card room, to the dugout, to now this baseball scoreboard. I've created all of them, and it's a lot of work and something I take a lot of pride in. And I'd rather be all out if I'm not going to be all in. And I'm just super grateful to each and every one of you who gave this show a listen and supported me during this journey in my life. And I look forward to share what's next when the time comes. I'm Dom Manna. Enjoy the rest of the baseball season.